welcome back to View from Brussels. Today we're joined by Bruno Gonçalves, who is member of the European Parliament for the S&D Group. Bruno, thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with a bit of a broader political picture of what's happening right now within the S&D Group, as you guys have had a bit of a shakeup. Would you mind speaking a bit to what's happening and what this means for the future of the S&D Group?
Yeah, I think that the shaking is that we are stronger than ever, and we know what we want to do on the end of this first midterm, but also the second midterm. And the answer is that we cannot hold much more time or any more time on our ambition and on our priorities. That starts from housing, and we hope that the Council is doing much more, but that starts also by the legislation that we have about, for example, how this digital world is impacting minors, impacting children. And what we have seen from industry, mainly the non-European industry, is quite harming to our children. I've been in schools where most of these kids are spending now 8, 9, 10 hours a day in social media without any control. Some of them shouldn't even be on social media because it is forbidden for minors under 13. Yet they can do it because there is a lack of transparency and a lack of control by this social media. And then also tackling what I think it's a major issue for Europe, or two major issues that come together. The first is economic growth, and I'm pretty sure we'll speak about it later. Yeah. But the other is not any economic growth. We need an economic growth that is sustained, but is also sustainable for everyone. We cannot have an economic growth that serves with the 1% that is getting richer, but it's making the 90% that are underneath what we used to call middle class poorer and suffering the most from inflation. So I think that when it comes for our group, regardless of having one more, one less member, we are, and we will be, until the end of this mandate, the second biggest family in the group, in the parliament, and we will be the leading force of progressive forces within parliament.
So speaking to perhaps a bit of the younger voters who might be a bit uncomfortable or swaying or unconvinced right now with the S&D Group or with the center left, what is your perhaps thoughts about that message to them or concerns about what's happening among the younger voters?
My first answer to them is that they are right. And they have all right to be more than frustrated with the center left, with the S&D. They have all the right to be frustrated with the way that we have moved into the future. In a lot of senses, but in the sense that politics should have shaped a different world for them. We have told this generation, that is my generation, but even the generation that comes forward, that is Generation Z, that they are the most qualified ones, that they are the most prepared for the future, that they will be the brighter generation, that their future would be immensely better than their parents. And guess what? They cannot afford a home, they cannot afford the rent, they cannot afford grocery because of inflation. And now they even have to face a new challenge that they don't even find a job related to their qualifications, either because in their own country they don't find the proper salary that they think it's adjustable to their situation, but now they even have to face what is to come with artificial intelligence. And unfortunately, instead of having a revolution that should be, and I think will be, a revolution for the best, what we are seeing now is greed taking over. And I'm not a Catholic, but I took very good note of what the Pope said. Artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed. This is a social doctrine of the Church, one of the most conservative institutions in the world, saying that AI is to be disarmed. And I ask to these young people that are listening to us, what is the AI that they want? And the AI, the future that they want, is not one that is in the hands of a few people, 5 or 6, that are not even Europeans.
The European Commission has recently brought out its tech sovereignty package. On the one hand, the package was presented as a step towards EU sovereignty. As well, on the other hand, critics are arguing it's relying a bit too heavily on foreign providers, among as well the other concerns that you're raising now with disarming AI. Who's right in this debate, and how should the spectrum or the pendulum move about the right approach the EU should be taking?
I don't want to say who's right or who's wrong, at least in the sense that this is so new, so embryonic, that it would be even ambitious to me to say that there is a right sense to the sphere.
There's more nuance than that.
We are still exploring in a lot of senses. What we know already is the following, and I will put some very concrete data on the table. SK Hynix, South Korean. Samsung, South Korean. Nvidia, American. TSMC, Taiwanese. These major, Intel, AMD, you name it, any of the major suppliers of chips right now are not in the EU. More, what these companies mean to the world economy over the last year is immense. I could say that, for example, NVIDIA's income is now, I think, around, or at least valuation, not income, but they also have an operational profit of 50%. I think last trimester, 70%, something like this. I mean, probably the best business model someone has ever built to this scale. But if you see the market valuation, so how much is the valuation of this company? In the open market is $5 trillion.
Significant.
Portuguese economy, GDP, if you measure with GDP, is less than 300 billion. But you can even compare it with some of the major powers in Europe. There is no 5 trillion economy. If you compare it to the US economy, that is the biggest economy by far in the world, what we have is that NVIDIA represents now 15% of the GDP of America. So if on the one hand, I think it's very harmful to the world to have a concentration of power and capital in 5 or 6 companies around the world, I think it's even worse when none of them is European. Why? Because workers won't profit from that, states won't profit from that, capital and innovation won't be here, and salaries won't be paid here. And if on the one hand, I think it is already too harmful, too harsh, and not good to have this disparity of salaries, and I'm not even speaking from CEO to engineer, from CEO to worker, that's the reality that we unfortunately know. But if we compare among sectors, if you compare the biggest company in Portugal, the average wage of the biggest company in Portugal with the average wage of any of these companies, the difference is immense. It's more than 10 times. In the lowest ceiling. If you go to the median, it's even higher. So it means that first we need to be more competitive. And I think that this tech sovereignty package comes on the right time and comes on the right direction. That is, more than speaking of regulation that we already have, at this point we need to speak about capacity. We need data centers, we need European data centers, and we should have a focus on energy, sustainable energy, because it's a big factor in the chunk of the equation of artificial intelligence. But we also need to start preparing for the production of European chips, European hardware. And that's where I think that the Commission could have been, I'm not saying more ambitious, but we probably can work the piece that is coming to Parliament. This is a process that just started, and I want to commend the Commission and the Commissioner, the Executive Vice President, for the work that she has been doing. I think that coming from a Nordic country, she also knows very well what is this combo of having social protection with a good environment for business, and that's where I'm coming from. But I also think that if on the one hand we need to speak about inequalities, on the other we need to have better European jobs, and that comes with better European industry. And I think that on that direction, this CADA is pointing properly.
You led me a bit into my next question, especially speaking on competitiveness, and another criticism being that the proposal doesn't really challenge the dominance of US big tech. And you also mentioned that, in addition, you see CADA or CADA, as I'm sure we've both heard both acronyms pronounced, that it's starting to or should create the conditions to promote and to create European tech champions. How do you see this emerging in practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite, I've just been to South Korea. And South Korea is not an immense country like any other, like when we compare with European continent, or at least with the European Union bloc. But they have developed over the past 5 years, at least 10, manufacturing chips, manufacturing technological hardware industry that is among the best in the world. What we have seen, for example, with workers striking one day in Kappa Hynix, and then the company allocating 10% of their profits, meaning that each of these workers would get, and we are getting, $400,000 per year. It shows you how good the bet was. So I think that our problem is not so much of regulation. I think we have one of protectionism for sure, but we need one of integration. Why? First, it's not a matter of skills. We have the skills here. It's both a matter of energy and being fast in deploying. We need fast deployment in investments. We need fast deployment when it comes to bureaucracy. And that doesn't mean, we have seen over this mandate the focus on omnibusing. Huh?
Yes.
It's exactly the opposite of what the US, China, and South Korea are doing. What we need is public policy. What we need is public industry. What we need is the states getting together, coming to a cabinet of ministers and saying, the bet is here. Instead of sending money everywhere, we will focus here. And focusing is not only with money and investment. Focusing is, for example, Spain has done it over the past 5-6 years with the film industry. If you went to Hollywood 10 years ago, all the films were filmed there. Now you go to Hollywood, you go to California, and they are telling you that they are comparing budgets with Spain because it's cheaper to produce in Spain, and the quality is better. So if we were able to do it on an hegemonic, field such as the film industry, I believe we can also do it in the chips industry. Furthermore, when we speak about films, they are very good, they are essential, but the economy is not dependent on that.
Of course.
But when we speak about chips, the future of the industry and the present of the industry is dependent on the capacity that we have to absorb, to collect data, but also to produce new models. And that's also where artificial intelligence comes. I don't know what's the future of artificial intelligence. I think that the Magnifica, the last encyclical from the Pope, it's quite curious because this is Pope 14th, Leo 14th. Pope Leo 13th, hence why this Pope chose the name Leo, was the Pope heading the church during the first industrial revolution.
Okay.
So the Pope chose this name because he wanted to focus his intervention in what he thinks and what he believes to be the challenge of humanity in the present decade. And that is undoubtedly artificial intelligence. So when we look to that, and when we look at European Union, we know what has been the promotion of the accelerated zones. So zones where you have lower permitting times, you have also lower regulation applied. But I think that at this point we need higher coordination from states. It's unfortunate that we now see the news that the idea of the common fighter jet, the Franco German fighter jet couldn't go forward. I think that clearly shows what for me is the biggest trouble that we now have in the Union, that is the lack of unification and harmonization. But if we are not able to do it at the European level for AI and chips, we are doomed to fail, and we will continue buying from the state, China, Taiwan, or South Korea, for a simple reason, that is, market does not function, consumers do not function, simply because we want them to behave one or the other way. They will go on an open market that is the freedom that we have at the EU, on a perspective of having the best product available at that time. That doesn't mean that we don't need to be cautious, but I don't believe in full protectionism. I believe that on that sense, public policy is the best tool, and industrial policy is the best tools, are the best tools that we have.
Is that something that industrial policy, public policy, or the tenets of that, coordination and speed, is that what you would like the Parliament to push for further on the tech sovereignty package?
I think that we need to have a clear focus on the capacity that is to be generated. What is the goal? How are we funding and finding money? No. We have spoken, we already have a regulation coming into place on the definition of the gigafactories that we have. How is this translation of capacity going to be transformed into demand? Are European businesses prepared for the change in AI? Will it be positive to the majority of the workers? And what is this new idea that has surged also in CAD or CAIRA, has been accompanied by Senator Bernie Sanders on the other side of the Atlantic, that is, what is in it for the public? So let's put this. I've just read a book that is called Genesis that I also recommend to everyone that is watching us. The Genesis, the last book of Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State and most powerful man in a lot of business, in a lot of American administrations with Schmidt and Mundy, states that we need to prepare for the future, but we also need to pay attention because this future could be a fully automated one. So the difference from this revolution to the others is that probably if we get to the point of AGI, super intelligence, artificial intelligence will be enough to deploy a lot of things. I will give one of the scenarios, I will put in place one of the scenarios that they trace there. Imagine a war. Their idea of future of war is a war that is not even fought, where AI computes all the scenarios that we have, like quantum mechanics, and if they cannot find a way to win that war, the state doesn't even go. It means fighting a war without fighting a war, but you still lose, and someone still wins. If you compute everything at the same time, there might be only one winner. Could we have a global one nation? Is it possible? Or on the other hand, would someone, human, in charge of this AI deploy nuclear weapons simply because they cannot afford or they cannot tolerate defeat? These kind of scenarios should not only alarm us, but they should prepare us for the future. I don't want an artificial intelligence that does not serve the 10 billion people that we have in the world. If the artificial intelligence is just to serve 5, 6, 10 people that are in command, it's not one to free the people, it's one to doom the people. And that's exactly what we should avoid. And I think that the Pope encyclica is also very good on that, what he calls the social doctrine in artificial intelligence, with 3 major factors in place. The first, that truth should be a common good. Quite curious when most of these parliaments are now full with disinformation and populist. The second is that there should be dignity in work. Means that work still has a place for us, for humans. Without work, probably life is better, but we don't know how it will be. And the third is that regardless of anything, we must choose freedom over dependency. Freedom of thought, freedom of creativity, freedom of imagination over dependency on a single tool that tells you what you should do, what is the sum up of that book, what is the idea that is the best. We should enhance our capacity to think rather than diminishing it.
You make me have a lot of flashes of apocalyptic future sci-fi movies right now.
I hope not.
I hope, well, let's see what our audience thinks. But so it is interesting bringing up the social doctrine and also thinking about the future. And we mentioned it at the start of this episode about the youth of tomorrow, and that this is also going to gravely impact their futures and the Gen Alpha and the ones who come after that. I want to pivot back and kind of end this conversation a bit on your audience and your messages, as well as your engagement with the younger generation. If you had to perhaps identify, and I think you already identified some of the issues that will define the political outlook of young Europeans over the next decade, if it had to be one, what would it be?
Oof, that's hard.
You're very good at telling stories. So.
No, I think it's hard because I mean it's very ambitious on one side to look at the future and to say what will happen. I could have not imagined that we would be here speaking about the super intelligent computer in 2 years ago. I'm not saying 10 years ago. What I'm saying is that I think the future is one of political imagination, meaning that the optimistic view the optimism of the will, Gramsci would say, that I have for the future is one where people are freed from slavery, all kinds of slavery, slavery of thought, slavery of work, and that are ones that they are free to use their work time, their time, to what the ancient Romans called leisure. Leisure as a form of osium at the time, uh, as a form of thinking, not entertainment, as a form of thinking, as a form of creating, where we are all different artists imagining a different world and contributing to society, eliminating poverty, eliminating injustice, and still having space for innovation. I don't believe in a place or in a world where the outlook for the youth is one where the youth and humanity does not have space. So if there is one thing, one word that I would have to choose, that would be empathy.
Empathy. I like that. Well, I will ask you one question that has a bit less to do with empathy and perhaps more to do with a bit of realism of where we're at now. And that's that a lot of money is being asked to be spent to defense. How do you justify to young Europeans of what's happening to their economy and what they're seeing as diminishing their chances at affording houses and affording their future if so much is being spent toward defense?
I mean, I think that the words are more than important, they are real. But I don't see it from an economic perspective only. First, there is no economy without safety. And I think the binomium that we should be looking at is safety and security. Safety, we need a safe Europe, we need to defend ourselves, and we need to avoid anyone from even thinking of attacking Europe. Because by the time that happens, we know what history shows us, and that is that we enter into a chaotic time. We don't know if unity will still be there, we hope so, but whenever war has come to Europe, Europeans were the defeated ones, because they were the ones paying with their lives. Secondly, security. Security, because security is not only about the security of the states, it's the security of the individual. Meaning that when we think about the future, we should also think that we can spend in defense and still spend on social programs, still spending on innovation, still spend on industrial policy. And if you don't believe in me, take the example of what the liberals love to speak about, that is the United States of America. The fastest growing economy, the pillar of innovation in the world, the country leading the world in innovation, not in social policy, unfortunately, but also leading in defense spending. I don't think we need to spend as much as the US. I think that our spending should also be on dual use, civic capacity. This is my last thought. That is, if you are not able to spend in your own defense, someone will be defending. And that means that you will not have authority on your own territory. What we're trying to build with this new Europe is a sovereign Europe where Europeans get to decide their future and are not dependent on whatever others want.
Well, thank you for ending us on a very positive or high note. It was a pleasure to have you here today, Bruno.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.